All right, then we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Glad you can join us today. My name is Tang Lee. I lead our PlantPredict team here at Terabase, and I'll be your host in today's webinar. And joining me today are Dylan Mora, a civil engineer here at Terabase, and Andrew Dobbins, engineering project manager at KWRE. They'll give you a brief overview of their background and expertise at the beginning of their sections. But first, I'd like to just take a few minutes to go over our agenda today and provide an introduction to Terabase and the PlantPredict suite of products. Okay, so this is the third installment of this intriguing topic that's kept our engineering and product team quite busy for the last couple of years now. We've introduced this challenge of earthwork assessment for specifically terrain following tracker, but utility scale solar projects generally, and how Terabase tackles this in a previous webinar. First one was last August in 2023, and then we followed up with an introduction to Terrain Pro in October. So Dylan's going to give us a quick recap of the content from those two webinars, and then we'll send out links to those webinars for those who are interested in getting a little bit more detail about those topics. And then he's going to finish up by discussing just some general CAD tools options, which is often the question we get from our users of Terrain Pro. While the web-based workflow is great to get very, very quick and accurate answers, engineers want to transition to CAD to further develop their designs. So taking us into that, from that web workflow to CAD, we'll have Andrew to provide the civil engineer's perspective. He'll be talking about the legacy tools and processes to perform this analysis. And then Andrew's going to do a demo for us using our new feature for the CAD import into Terrain Pro. And then I'll provide some closing comments, and then we're going to take your questions at the end. Okay, a few minutes on Terabase. So at Terabase, we are building digital and physical solutions to accelerate the deployment of utility scale solar and hybrid generation assets. And that's what you see on your screen here. So on the left, we have our software and services for the development and pre-construction phase of the project. So central to this is PlantPredict, our solar energy modeling engine. So we've been expanding PlantPredict into a full suite of professional design tools, including layout automations, material estimates, economic modeling, and grading analysis. We also have construction products and services, including our construction management and monitoring software called Construct. And for the physical world, we offer automation solutions called TerraFab. We bring a mobile factory to your project site, complete with an assembly line, rovers to automate the module, to torque tube, to pile installation. We've successfully deployed this technology on 3 projects in the US to date, and we'll be scaling it up to the multi-100 megawatt scale level in 2025. And finally, our operations technology team on the right side here, we provide a full set of SCADA and control solutions for solar and hybrid plants. Okay, that's an overview of Terabase. All right, and diving into the PlantPredict suite of products, I'll start with the namesake. So PlantPredict is a cloud-based modern energy model built specifically for utility scale solar and hybrid plants, with a long track record of continuous benchmarking against operating assets at the gigawatt scale. Focusing on the middle group, we have our Pro tools to sit on top of our PlantPredict bankable energy model to perform sophisticated studies and easily and quickly within your web browser. So we've got Design Pro, which will be included in Dylan's demo. It generates a detailed layout, BOQ, cost estimate, financial model for your project, and it allows you to run a batch of scenarios to find the optimal configuration. We've got Voltage Pro, which enables simulation-based approach to string sizing. So we've got 2 webinars on that topic specifically, which I recommend you checking out on our website if you're interested. And then we've got Terrain Pro, which is the latest pro tool, having been released in October last year. Terrain Pro drastically simplifies the process of generating earthwork assessments for your project site and is specifically designed to assist in the evaluation of terrain following trackers. At the Pro and Enterprise tiers, your team will have access to all of these tools at your disposal. Okay. And what's new on the screen are the extensions on the right-hand side. We're introducing this CAD-ready extension to connect Terrain Pro to your CAD-based workflows. And Andrew is going to give us a demo of that later in the presentation. And then finally, we are able to offer API access to our energy model, PlantPredict, and our earthwork assessment model, Terrain Pro, for custom application developments. So for organizations that prefer to develop your own digital solutions but see value in integrating these models, please contact us for more details. Okay, we're fortunate to have Andrew Dobbins here with us today. He's here to give us a closer look at his company and share a bit about his journey. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Tang. I'm excited to be here today. I'll work through just really quickly, introduce myself and our company, KWRE. So I'm a civil engineer. I've worked on renewable projects since about 2016, specifically utility scale solar for the majority of that time. At KWRE, we're a fifth-year-old company with a parent company, Kieran Wright, which is based in civil and surveying. And under our suite of services serving renewable projects right now, we have civil, electrical, structural, and survey. Um, we serve projects across the country in a majority of states and are licensed in a majority of states. On the survey side, we have over 30 survey crews and the second largest surveyor in California, and again serve much of the country. Looking forward to diving in deeper. I'll pass it back over to Tang and Dylan for now, though.
Thanks, Andrew. And next up, we have Dylan, our in-house senior civil engineer at Terabase. Go ahead, Dylan.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dylan, civil engineer here at Terabase Energy. I've been pushing dirt around, at least on paper, for about 15 years. And I currently serve as the engineering services manager here from the San Francisco Bay Area. So in past webinars, we have covered this topic previously. In past webinars, we've focused on some things like, why do we care about earthwork in the first place on a solar site? What are some of the basics of terrain following trackers? How do they help us? What are the complicated design elements of terrain following trackers? We talked about some earthwork basics, fundamentals of earthwork. We also talked about some challenges and some modern approaches to those challenges. So today's webinar will touch on the challenges and what a modern approach looks like. But if you have interest in some of the previous topics, I urge you to visit our website. All the webinars are available up there, and you can view those pretty easily. So in this session, we'll explore current challenges in earthwork and introduce a modern solution, Terrain Pro by PlantPredict. Okay. So before we dive into Terrain Pro, let's discuss some of the earthwork-related challenges that we face today. These challenges, I hope you'll agree at the end of this presentation that these challenges underscore the true value of Terrain Pro in addressing and mitigating them. So I'll present 7 challenges here. So the first one is complex terrain. A lot of the flat areas have been used up, right? And so projects are increasingly being pushed into complex terrains. that are harder to, they're more difficult to design and build on. We often have grading restrictions, so regulatory or cultural restrictions that can limit the amount of grading that's allowed on a site. We have soil constraints. Those soil constraints could be things like, depth to bedrock, and things like that can complicate the design and construction. And if you don't know how much earth you need to move, then you could be putting your project at risk. Then we have terrain following trackers themselves. So these trackers are very helpful to us in the industry because they can reduce earthwork by up to, between 60, 90%, even 100%, depending on the site. But they do present design complexities. And the reason they are complex is because tracker profiles have to minimize the earthwork while adhering to tracker specifications. They don't articulate in an unlimited fashion, and so the design of the profile in an optimal case is very tricky and requires a lot of iteration. And these sites are massive, right? So we're talking about a lot of profiles. We also have limited early stage data. So at the start of a project, critical inputs like array layouts and site surveys may not be available. So we'll show you how to work through that if that's the case for you. We have time constraints. So developing the inputs required for a civil engineer to do their work take time to develop. Layouts take time to put together. Surveys take time to collect. And so and then once those inputs are available, then the earthwork calculations themselves can take days or weeks, and that delays progress. And the last challenge that we have is a big one is that the existing tools often lack the speed, automation, and ease of use needed, and some require highly specialized skill sets. So those are some of the challenges. Terrain Pro directly addresses these challenges by offering efficient, design-ready solutions for both design and construction phases. And with Terrain Pro, we can afford to iterate, and that's the key in engineering, is finding the best alternatives and pushing those forward. But if you can't iterate and you can't do these calculations quickly, it makes that very difficult. Okay. So as promised, we are going to show you a demo for the case where you don't have a layout available to you and you don't have a survey available to you. So let me share my screen. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my web browser up on your screen. The page we've landed on is the PlantPredict page. This should look familiar if you're already a customer of ours. We're going to look at the left-hand part of the screen here, and we're going to go to Design Pro. We've identified a project for our demo today in Brentwood, California. So we'll navigate there. And we don't have anything on the site, right? We've identified the site by coordinates only, so we don't have any layouts or boundaries yet. So the first thing we need to do is create a site plan. And today I'm going to use a KML file. Okay, I already have it loaded in here. That file, I want that file to serve as the boundary for our array layout. So I'll click that, and that should pop up on the screen for us. Now there are a lot of other exclusions that we could include here. For today, we're gonna keep it simple and just have a boundary. But the other thing that is required by our Design Pro software is a substation location. So I will place one here for us. All right. So we've identified a boundary. We've identified a substation location, and we'll save that plan. Okay. So we have our site plan. Next, we will go to simulations, and we will create a new simulation using that site plan that we just created. We also have, in addition to our webinars on Earthwork, we also have webinars on how Design Pro works. The purpose of Design Pro really is to create layouts and get energy models out of it. So you're able to select modules and trackers and inverters. I'm going to default through all these things today in the interest of time. But if you're interested in Design Pro itself, we do have webinars on that, and we can always have offline discussions about that as well. So we'll toggle through these. So right now it's just looking at the geometry of the site, its shape, its area, location of the substation, and it brings up some additional windows for inputs. We're going to input GCR of 0.4. We'll leave the other areas blank because what we're trying to do right now is just flood the site with arrays and get an example of a system capacity and earthwork, right? For sake of this demo, we've never, looked at the site. We don't know what the earthwork looks like. We don't know what the capacity could be on the site. So that's what we're trying to look at. So we'll click next through these. We'll default through these other inputs that you see on the screen and submit that for analysis. While that's analyzing, you can watch the status down here at the bottom part of your screen if you wish. So we'll wait for that to process. I did create the site boundary using a KML layer. You can also create boundaries by using some of the layers that we have in the software. For example, you might want to choose parcel. So if we turn on the parcel layers, we can select. There we go. If we turn on the parcel layers, the boundaries for all the legal parcels will show up, and we can select parcel by parcel if we wish. We can also draw boundaries by hand. So just so you're aware that there are other options for creating boundaries in there. We also have other land information, subsurface information, environmental information in there. So you can use all those to create your boundaries, create your exclusions, and things like that. Okay, so if we glance back down at the bar at the bottom of the screen, it looks like we are almost done with our calculation. It's working on the energy model itself, but if you see here, it also worked on the total grading required for the site. So it's telling us that we have about 140,000 cubic meters of soil to move for the site, but it's not telling us anything else. So let's go to the right here. We could look at PlantPredict and look at more specifics of the energy model and the performance model, but we could also look at the Terrain Pro and look at the terrain, the heat map for the earthwork itself. So while the heat map is loading, which should only take a few seconds here, we'll look at the left-hand part of the screen and the right-hand part of the screen. On the left, we have all the parameters that were used for this default analysis, right? We have a minimum pile reveal, we have a torque tube slope in the north direction, torque tube slope in the south direction. We have a reveal window, which we can vary, and we have the slope change, which we can vary. So we can play with all of these parameters and run an analysis in just a few seconds to understand what the impacts would be. For example, if you wanted to change the reveal window. I'll let Andrew cover that in his presentation. He's going to show you a similar demo, but with your own CAD layout and CAD topo. What you can see on the screen here is the heat map for the earthwork, and you can see where your cut and fills are. You can see the volumes over here on the right. So the takeaway that I'd like you to have from this short demo is just that without a CAD layout and without a survey, you can understand the earthwork on your site. And we created the layout in Design Pro on the previous tab. And you might be wondering, well, where did you get your elevation data from, right? So we can see that if we look at the bar on the right side, we can see what the elevation source data was. And in this case, it's from the USGS. The site is in the US. It's a 1 meter resolution, and it's from their 3-depth program, which is their program that they are currently working on to collect LiDAR information for the United States. This analysis can be run any place on the globe, but the elevation source data can vary in resolution and in quality. All right, so that's an example of if you don't have any information, we'll go back to our presentation. All right, and this now brings us to CAD solutions. So let's take a moment to discuss the role of CAD software in our site design and earthwork calculations. So what does the current landscape look like? We have CAD software costs that range from $500 to over $15,000. The $15,000 would include a CAD plugin that you might use for layouts and tracker profiles. So you have quite a bit large range there. Most programs can process terrain data in the form of contours, but advanced tools like Civil 3D are required for surface models. And layouts can be created manually or automatically depending on the software's costs and capabilities. So the challenges with existing tools are that once the layouts and topo data are in CAD, earthwork calculations can still take us a long time to complete, especially if we want to look at multiple parameter sets. For example, we want to look at different pile reveals or pile reveal windows, or we want to look at a standard tracker or a terrain following tracker. That can take a lot of time with the existing tools. And so, there are no existing tools that provide complete automated earthwork calculations at this time. And that's why Terrain Pro stands out. So we have the Terrain Pro ready, CAD-ready extension that works seamlessly with just your basic AutoCAD LT, which limits the need for expensive CAD software. And it streamlines the earthwork calculation process, saving us time and resources. So now we'll jump to a poll. Before we go to Andrew, we'll jump to a poll. What type of CAD do you use? Are you using CAD LT, regular vanilla AutoCAD? Are you using Civil 3D? Are you using Civil 3D with some sort of plugin or some other kind of software? Wait a few minutes or a few seconds for those answers to come in. All right. Civil 3D is in the lead. All right. Well, that's interesting. It looks like Civil 3D, most of you, over 60% of those that responded say that you're using Civil 3D. And then at 15%, we have AutoCAD Civil 3D with some sort of a plugin that you're using. So, okay, well, appreciate that. We'll go to Andrew.
Thanks, Dylan. I'll do my best not to double cover anything you went through there, but I'll jump in here and discuss a little bit the interface from CAD into the Terrain Pro software, and kind of, just compare the process, the legacy process of designing all terrain trackers on sites versus utilizing Terrain Pro. So legacy process, you can see here, and as many civil engineers or developers, EPCs know in the industry, is pretty CAD intensive and labor intensive. I will give the industry credit, and obviously, a lot of hard work across a lot of folks in the industry. Automation is coming along, but historically there's been minimal automation within Civil 3D to be able to run through and design a solar site like we're talking about. And now with the Terrain Pro software, it's a user-friendly interface. I'll work through that and show how quickly you can output results to back into CAD from that interface, and then like Dylan showed, it's got quick results. You can see pretty quickly earthwork estimates within the software, and pretty quickly work back into continuing a design in CAD. And that automation goes a long way in how I can serve a client. The ability to vet out multiple designs in a short period of time, and help make important decisions in early stage or middle stage of a project. So I'll go ahead and fire up my screen here. I'll start in CAD and work through the process with Terrain Pro. I believe this should be visible to everyone now. So I'll start out here. What Dylan showed was the scenario where you're starting out without a manufacturer supplied layout or an electrical engineer supplied layout. I'm going to take a use case where we have a layout either supplied by manufacturer or by the electrical engineer, and we have contours to work with for the project site. I'll work through a couple things here so that the folks on the webinar can see what we're working with. I've got this contour data as polyline contours with elevation data stored, and I'll click on one of those and point out here that in the properties, the elevation is stored for each one of these contours, and that's the case for this. This often can be a deliverable from a surveyor or from GIS analysis of LiDAR on the site, and is definitely usable at this stage of a project to be able to run through and perform earthwork analysis. And then a couple other things I'll point out that are part of this CAD file here. I have a coordinate system set up. It's important to be able to interface with the Terrain Pro software that we've got a geolocated site layout. And in this case, I'm on a California NAT 83 coordinate system. And then the third thing I'll point out that plays into the interface with Terrain Pro is the trackers that are within the layout here. So these trackers are block references, and they've got pile locations embedded in them. With the trackers that I have in here today, each one of these trackers has unique naming based on the manufacturer's guidance for exterior and internal rows. And then if I open up that CAD block, we have each one of the piles is a nested block within that CAD block, again with unique naming to help identify the type of pile that's needed in each location. I'll back out of there, and I've got Terrain Pro ready and queued up to load this in. So I'll jump over to that interface. I guess first off, Dylan started out as well in the PlantPredict landing page. You can navigate to Terrain Pro on the left side of the landing page here and open up that app to begin loading in a site for analysis. I'll start here with Create Analysis and browse to that DXF that I was showing on the previous screen. As that's loading in, I'll just point the viewers here to the kind of this checklist that the software is going to run through and analyze within the DXF file. It's in meters or feet. This file happens to be in feet. It's got the array blocks with piles as nested blocks, as I pointed out, and it's got topographic data as contours and it's geolocated. So we're checking all the boxes to be able to move into the next phase of this. I was running Civil 3D on this, but it's important to note that all of these items can be assigned to a site layout within just your basic AutoCAD LT as well. The next page on this analysis creates a summary of the contents of the CAD file here. So I've got my contours listed here. It's reading the contour data there. I've got the nested array piles within the tracker blocks, and I've got the tracker blocks themselves. Again, I'll point out that the naming of these tracker blocks came through, and the naming of the array piles came through. That'll be important for some of the outputs that come out of the Terrain Pro system. I'll point out one more time here, we're in the NAD 83 California State Plains Zone 2 US foot coordinate system for this project, which geolocates us where we need to be able to interface with the software. If I had a use case where I didn't have contours in that base CAD file I was working with, I could still come in here and, like Dylan showed on his demo, I could utilize that USGS LiDAR data set, and I've got a 1 meter DEM available to myself here if I wanted to use that. I'd like to use the contours for this analysis, so I'll go ahead and I'll create that analysis. While that runs, I've got a finished analysis queued up here. Dylan teed me up for this a little bit. There's opportunity within the parameters that are shown here on the left side of the screen. I can see the heat map of my current analysis, but I could run through and do things like change my reveal window. I could go ahead and, if I wanted to go with a little bit steeper south-facing slope, or perhaps introduce allowance for articulation of the torque tube along the run of the tracker, I could do that as well. There is opportunity to take advantage of some of the manufacturer inputs here, that kind of their standard parameters are loaded in to be able to run standard tracker parameters as well. I'll go ahead and let me see here to make sure. Okay, so I'll go ahead and I've got my new one loaded up here. I'll go ahead and add this configuration that I've created here and set that to run. I've got that running. Well, we've now got another configuration ready and running here that'll pump out earthwork estimation like Dylan was showing in his demo. I'll point out a couple items while this one's loading as well. What's really useful for me as a civil engineer is this configuration output button. If I click that, I'll be able to download a CSV that I can import back into CAD. Again, I use Civil 3D, and it's important to me to have a file like this to be able to export into CAD and continue to work through that. I'll pull up a sample of what that file might look like. The file will assign pile ID and rec ID to the piles and trackers throughout the site. Given that this is a site that it's got thousands of piles on here, so I've got a lot of data banked up in here, and it carried with each pile location. It records that existing grade that came through with my contours, recommends a proposed grade, recommends a pile reveal, a top of pile elevation, and records what that expected articulation of the tracker would be at each pile. Along with that, I pointed out here previously that racking name comes through into the Terrain Pro software. That also populates back into the CSV that exports out of the file. That's important for me as we work toward preparing things like pile plot plans on a project or running through our structural engineering review and design, that things like this carry through the entire process. So that's an important feature of the Terrain Pro software. So with that, I'll just really quickly jump back and show that within a matter of minutes, that analysis that I started up on the demo has already run. We've got estimated earthwork, estimated disturbed area of that earthwork, and features that allow you to look at individual trackers within the layout and get a visual for what that earthwork might look like there. With that, I'll go ahead and wrap up this part of the demo and stop sharing my screen. We've got up here, I guess, one thing I didn't show on the demo is there's opportunity to really queue up several analyses at once. The demo I put together there probably took 5 minutes to run, and had an earthwork heat map ready to review. I could do the same thing with a handful of different tracker parameters. Consider a straight torque tube, one that articulates, one that's terrain following, different reveal ranges. And in a matter of minutes to an hour, I can have a dozen results out that I could use to just in a discussion with developers or EPCs, to help decision making early in the project. To put a bow on, I guess, my takeaways as a civil engineer, with the ability to use Terrain Pro, it's able to shorten my workflow considerably, and kind of empowers me to be able to be a great resource to test different scenarios, and provide information quickly to those that need it. And it becomes a companion to design. I don't think I really talked through this before during the demo, but the ability to iterate this and prepare a proposed design within CAD and then continue to enter it back into Terrain Pro and check for any inefficiencies in that design is a big win as a civil engineer. As well, it gets me started off on the right foot so that I can pull my design together in CAD and review things like hydrology concerns, road grading and alignment, and have a lot of data to base decisions off of in that process. Before I hand back off to Dylan and Tang here, just kind of wanted to summarize that legacy process that we talked about, that's AutoCAD intensive. You typically see a 2 to 3 week timeline for design turnaround on one iteration, and I certainly can't speak for the price that any individual civil might throw out there on an effort like that, but we see somewhere around $30,000 per design iteration. In utilizing Terrain Pro, as I showed, I can I can run through multiple iterations of design options and tracker options, and then dive deep into grading a site, do it in a week, and pass on less cost, obviously, to a developer or EPC. As a special webinar pricing here, I did want to put out there that if you learned about us via this webinar, we'd be happy to provide a 1 week timeline on running a site through Terrain Pro and putting together a 10% grading package and do it for a reduced price. You can reach us through the QR code here or with contact info provided by the team after the presentation. With that, I'll pass it back to Tang and Dylan.
Thanks, Andrew. That was very interesting. So now we'd like to turn to our poll question number 2. Considering the improvements on duration and cost that engineers like KWRE can pass on to their customers, we'd like to ask you, what would you use this service for? So would you do this for site selection, to perform cost estimates, to inform your tracker selection, for permitting, or other purposes? So we'll take a few seconds here as the results come in. Okay, so it looks like cost estimate would be the most popular use of a service like this. So coming in at 3/4 of the results. Wow. Okay, thank you. All right, so closing notes from our perspective. So if there's one thing I want you to take away from this webinar, is the fact that we can now perform Terrain Pro earthwork analyses with your CAD layout. You don't need to have a sophisticated CAD tool. In fact, a $500 subscription to AutoCAD LT would complement our solution really well. You just need to get your survey results in contour format, which is actually the official deliverable from licensed surveyors. And finally, I'd like to highlight the fact that this analysis is complementary to what the civil engineer's responsibilities in their workflow. It doesn't replace the need for a grading design that takes into account things like drainage, hydrology, roads, among other things. But it does really help with the array analysis and speeds up the work and saves the civil engineer a lot of time. Okay. Okay, so on pricing of the Terrain Pro CAD extension. So I'd like to take a minute to go over the PlantPredict suite pricing table. So on the left here, we got the core subscription tier, which is access direct to our PlantPredict energy model. You can subscribe to that at $425 per user per month, or with a discount if you go for an annual payment of $12.50 per user. And then in the middle, the Pro tier is our most popular. It gives you access to Design Pro, Terrain Pro, and Voltage Pro, in addition to the PlantPredict energy model. So that starts at $7,500 per year for 3 users, and then any additional users would be $2,500. And then what's new here are the extensions on the right column. So CAD-ready is an extension, so it's added on to the Pro subscription, and that gives you access to be able to start the analysis with your CAD files. Okay, so just an example of how the math would work out. So the entry point for the workflow that we've demoed here today would be a subscription to the Pro tier, which gets you 3 users for $7,500, and then adding on this extension is another $7,500. So that totals $15,000, gets you 3 users, so that's $5,000 per user per year to take advantage of the full suite of products, including this CAD-ready extension as we've demoed today. Okay. And with that, we'd like to start our Q&A session. Okay, so we're seeing quite a few questions in the chat here, so we're gonna pick out a few of them and get started.
And one note about the questions: if we don't get to your question during these last few minutes of the webinar, we will answer everybody's question individually via email.
Okay. Okay, first question. Do you have LiDAR data available? Dylan, can you take this one?
Yeah, thanks, Tang. Certainly. So yes, depending on the location, USGS LiDAR-derived data sets are available. They have great coverage in the US, and depending on the location of your project, this is often the best available satellite data that we offer. But to be transparent, we are not pulling the raw LiDAR data. Instead, we are referencing the 1 meter resolution DEM that has been created from the LiDAR data source.
Thanks, Dylan. Okay, another question. Can you import a LAN XML, TIFF surface, or TIN surface from Civil 3D? So the answer is you can bring these file formats into Civil 3D. You can create a surface, and then you can create contours from that. And what our workflow requires is looking for those contours. So it's up to you to create the contours in whatever interval you deem appropriate for your project. And then you would save that file as an DXF and bring it into the workflow. So that's how that would work. We don't import these files directly into Terrain Pro.
Tang, could I add a note there too?
Sure. Yeah, please.
Yeah. So what I demoed there was a 1 foot contour interval, but if I were to, and I'll turn my camera on here, sorry. If I were to, want to go and, if I wasn't trusting those 1 foot contours or maybe had good enough data that I wanted to go deeper than that, I could export from CAD, a half foot contour level or a, 0.1 foot contour level to whatever detail I wanted into the Terrain Pro software to kind of fine tune that even further.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thanks, Andrew. Another question here, is there a trial version available? Simple answer is yes, there is. So contact us in the form at the end of the webinar and we'll reach out to you and get you set up. Okay. Go through another question. Does AutoCAD LT prevent me from geolocating my array layout? I'll take this one. So no, actually, you're not prevented from geolocating with AutoCAD LT. It does come with the online map service. So we're happy to send a link to that feature by email following this webinar. Okay. What's the project or file size limitation? So the DXF file import process is limited to a 500 megabyte file. This file size should be sufficient for array layouts that are in excess of 1 gigawatt. The main driver on the CAD file size is actually not really how large your arrays are typically, because blocks are quite efficient. It's really about the terrain data you have. So contour lines is the format we're intaking. It's quite efficient, but it does vary from site to site depending on the resolution and how many contours you have, the density of the contours you have in your project. And again, as Andrew mentioned, you can decide on a very fine contour resolution, so that does affect how large your file size becomes. Okay. Next question, can this tool address drainage or road design? So Andrew, can you take this one?
Yep, I would say No, it doesn't address drainage or roads. I would still work on considering that, pairing it with a drainage study and reviewing that in Civil 3D or another process like that.
Thanks, Andrew. Next question might go to you as well. So does this tool attempt to balance earthwork?
From what I've seen, it works to provide the lowest possible earthwork result. So again, I would still work with Civil 3D in that case to try to balance based on the needs of a developer or EPC.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, so the way that we think about this is that the Terrain Pro tool, especially this CAD import process, is complementary to what the civil engineer would do to complete a full grading design. It's not a replacement for that. So we provide the civil engineer with the minimum required cut and fill, and that they would, and then that would be an input to their design process. Okay. All right. We have time for another few questions here. So does this support CAD files from my tracker supplier? I can take this one. So yes, the array layouts from tracker suppliers that we've seen quite a few, are actually great for the as an input for this process. Actually, they are the inspiration for how we've structured this workflow. They often are structured exactly the way we need, which is having piles as nested blocks within the tracker blocks. So this is a great way to start your earthwork analysis, because that's the best way to get where the pile are going to be located, the specific pile spacing for your tracker for your site. Okay. Take a few more questions here. Just going through. Okay, another question. What are you doing to account for deep cut fills on the edge of the array to make sure daylighting isn't impacting avoidances growing beyond LOD? So again, this is, thanks for that question, that's great. So there is a limitation to the Terrain Pro software. What it's looking at is providing results for within the array footprint, but as this question points out, there may be impacts to, you may need to daylight from the edge of the array on, and that's where we would expect the civil engineer to complete the grading design. So the software does not handle that directly. Okay. Yet. All right. So another question is, can we import PV case into Terrain Pro? As far as we understand, the PV case CAD file structure is not what we're looking for. So and I could be wrong on this because I'm not a PV case expert, but they're not providing nested blocks as piles within tracker blocks. But if they are, you can do that. Or if you could update the tracker blocks to have a nested block as a pile rather than how the PVCase data structure is, then it would be compatible. So there's PVCase is a CAD plugin, so it's not it's not going to dictate the end product. It's going to be helping you along your journey. So if you can structure your CAD file that you want to use in our software in a specific way, which Andrew had mentioned, just very simply nested block as piles and then within the tracker blocks, then it would work. Okay. There was another question here. So is Terrain Pro a plugin to AutoCAD to install? So Terrain Pro is not a CAD plugin. You are free to use any kind of CAD system, including products from AutoCAD or Autodesk or any other product. We've decided to first be compatible with importing a DXF rather than DWG. That's a more universal open source data format. So any CAD system actually would work. And it's not a CAD plugin, it's a web-based product that you can upload your CAD file to do the analysis. Okay. All right, we'll take one final question, and then the rest of the questions we will, as Rafael mentioned, we'll answer them directly via email. Okay, so most of the time the massive grading on the project is associated with stormwater and erosion and sediment control features and roads. Is the functionality for Terrain Pro limited to racking area earthwork analysis? So yes, it is. So Terrain Pro is specifically addressing the array area earthwork analysis from a mechanical limitation perspective. We wanted to be able to address the use case of looking at different tracker systems, doing pile height trade-offs, and making those decisions. The statement that says, most of the time the massive grading on the project is associated with stormwater, water, and erosion. I think that's true in some regions and in some projects. I think there are many projects where array grading is significant, and that's why we're seeing terrain following tracker features becoming more and more popular and more common. Our tool addresses one part of comprehensive grading design. Okay, and with that, I think we'll end the webinar, and we will end with, I think, some questionnaires.
All right, so we'll be sending out a recording of this webinar in the next 48 hours. You'll see a quick survey at the end of this webinar when you close out, in case you'd like to get in touch with the PlantPredict team, get a free trial, schedule a demo, or if you would like to contact KWRE for their special webinar pricing. If you have any other questions, please submit them at the survey at the end here. And we thank you for joining us today.